This is the Senate Minority Report. This is our fourth press conference, trying to bring everybody up to date and give the other side of what's going on in the legislature. We've completed 26 days in the 60-day session, and yesterday was a major day in terms of crossover voting for both the Senate and House. As was noted, it was a record-breaking time in both the Senate and the House. We got finished in 3 hours, a little after 12, and the House was finished about 6:15, 6:20. What does that tell you? Did we give adequate debate on the issues? I don't think so. With heavy majorities in both the House and the Senate, the majority party pretty much directs exactly what's going to happen. And what's going to happen is all of the bills passed yesterday, so there were really no surprises. But I think it is important to note several things. There are still major tax bills that are alive in both the House and the Senate. Most of the tax bills coming from the House. But there are a lot of fees, there are a lot of special charges, and any way you look at it, it's going to be even more difficult for the average family in Hawaii to make ends meet. And some of these fees, it's really interesting. Take, for example, the motor vehicle registration and weight tax fee. They talk in terms of, well, it's only $20 more, it's only this, it's only that. When you add it all up, it is very substantial, as I've told people before, suggested. Look at the details of not only your motor vehicle registration each year, see how much it's increased, but see the components, the the state components, the county components, and we heard from Mayor Carlisle last week that all of the city fees are going to go up, many of them up again over the last couple of years. So when you add all of these things together, they are extremely substantial. And there was a move, I note, in the House yesterday by the House Republicans to amend the motor vehicle increases to make sure that they would both be used for the purposes they're supposed to, and that is highway repair, and two, that the funds would not be raided as they have been in the past. The floor amendment failed, and the majority party is not to the mind of trying to mitigate that. Anyway, a couple of other things that we can talk about this morning. One is the governor's nominees. There are several that are up this week. This morning, for example, sunshine topping of D. Hurd is going to be heard at 10 a.m. in Judiciary, and Ms. Hermina Morita, for PUC, not only member but also chairman, will be heard also at the same time. I intend to be at that hearing and to ask questions. We also have the governor's new appointee to the Department of Health, Loretta Fuddy, and that will be coming up in a couple of weeks. And Mr. Gary Hooser, who, thank God, he's been given some employment, because, as you know, we're sitting in his former office, and we watched him walk the halls day by day. He managed to get his daughter employed in Senator Baker's office, but it'll be nice to see Gary have a regular paycheck. In fact, his wife agreed with that as well. He did pass out of the health hearing. He would be the OEQC director in the Department of Health. So that's what's coming up. The ethics bill that was introduced in the Senate, co-authored by Senator Leslie Hara and myself. 671, Senate Bill 671, has had a rocky start. The whole idea was to clamp down on extravagant and abundant gifts by legislators, by special interests to legislators and lobbyists. And I think that all of this culminated with a dinner from the Hawaii Institute of Public Affairs, HIPAA, where they were trying to invite all of us to $200 dinners. The bill that Senator Ihara and I had introduced initially would actually tighten up and make more stringent any gifts, and would make disclosure far more important. The bill was mysteriously amended, and it took out all of that and was kind of like free-range chicken. legislators could take gifts in any amount from anybody at any time. The Attorney General testified in opposition to that, and so did the chief, the OIP. And some of the changes were made in the Senate draft. However, when it came on the floor yesterday, they found yet another technical flaw. My understanding is that what the flaw would have done would have put some restrictions on 501c6 corporations and entities, and that just happens to include labor unions as well. And God knows we don't want to put any restrictions on labor unions in this building. So with the floor amendment that was adopted yesterday, the bill will be voted on the floor tomorrow. I intend to vote no on the bill. I intend to speak on it. Leslie Harr, the co-author, intends to vote, last time I talked to him, only with reservations and not to speak on the bill. It's a touchy subject here, and particularly with those people that give us gifts. I think we get enough gifts. We get gifts from the taxpayers every day. We pay for everything that we do in this legislature. Moving on, again, a reminder that bills that appear dead because they didn't make crossover are not dead until May 5th. Sine die when we leave the building, turn out the lights, gavel, and all of that. And I know the House is still saying, no GET increase. But the Senate is saying, GET increase, possibly. And the governor still is saying, well, I said no during the campaign, but heck, the campaign's over, so shucks, we may have to have that GET increase. If I were a betting man, and gambling is illegal in Hawaii, I would bet that before the end of April, we will reluctantly have to consider a general excise tax increase. The bills that I mentioned several weeks ago about the Native Hawaiian government are very much alive in the Senate. The Senate is pushing this. The Senate Hawaiian Affairs Committee and the Hawaiian Caucus are very active. And Senate Bill 1 basically circumvents the failed Akaka bill, which I think at this point almost everybody finally admits after 11 years is dead on arrival in Congress. And so the state is trying to substitute its recognition and special treatment for certain groups. The problem with that is, and I voted no on that bill, the problem is that there is a lot of dissension still among and between members of the Hawaiian community. And there is a Hawaiian convention which is ongoing and which has not concluded as yet. So we'll see more of that. The budget, which is still the number one issue, is no closer to resolution than it was a couple of weeks ago. But we're trading funds, we're trading increases, we're going after pensions, we're trying to find every bit of money that is lying around. And actually, what we're finding out now by examining special funds more is that there is a lot of money lying around. So we'll continue to look at the budget. In the meantime, both the House and Senate Republicans are preparing an alternative budget for discussion. Final item that I want to touch on, then I'll open it for questions, is what I consider to be the biggest boondoggle of this legislative session, and that is the proposed undersea power cable. This bill would purport to use technology which is untested and develop an undersea cable to provide power to Oahu. This has several ramifications. Number one, the actual cost of the cable I've estimated between $1 and $3 billion. Hawaiian Electric disagrees and says it's only $800 million, but Hawaiian Electric has been wrong before. Number two, it depends on massive infusion of capital and construction, particularly on the island of Lanai. And I know that Maui County legislators are not in favor of this, and the people of Lanai have not been queried as to whether they want their island basically to be an energy resource for the island of Oahu. The costs are tremendous on this. The productivity and the loss of energy in such a cable, even if it were to work the way it was supposed to, would be substantial. And I think that the only real beneficiaries to this is our favorite monopoly utility, Hawaiian Electric Company. So I will continue to try to expose the financial and other problems with this bill and to continue to fight it. And so basically that's what I see right now, other than two comments I wanted to make. A lot of these bills, including bills for mortgage foreclosures and others, are described as works in progress. That's nothing new. We hear that every year. But if it's a work in progress, why don't we get the progress first before we vote on it? Because what we're asked to do is vote on something that has so many questions, unanswered questions. It's really not fair. It's not fair to the legislature and not fair to the public. Secondly, I want to make a statement as far as the Senate about quorums. As you all know, I'm on every committee. I try diligently, because I have an excellent staff, to cover all of those committees, but I can't be everywhere at once, particularly when they schedule 3 or 4 decision makings in 4 different rooms at the same time. Yet that does not stop the majority from paging me, calling me, texting me, please come, we need you for a quorum. So my question is, what are the other 24 Democrats doing that they need me for a quorum in multiple hearings? Anyway, that's my comments. I'll be very happy to try and answer any questions.
I got 4 questions for you.
Yes, sir.
On SB 671, the
Ethics bill.
The amendment that the senator he introduced yesterday, if I understand correctly, limits it to 501c3s. Is that correct?
That is correct.
What's still unacceptable about the bill for you? I realize it was your original bill,
Sure.
and gutted and so forth, but why is that not an acceptable fix?
Well, I think that, again, why are we spending so much emphasis on gifts for legislators? I think that a lot of this is being driven by HIPAA, and I would remind people that the chair of HIPAA is very closely aligned with the governor, was involved in the governor's campaign.
Bill Connecticut.
Mr. Kaneko. So when we talk about, oh, this is just a nonprofit, this is just an independent, nonpartisan research organization, they have an agenda, they've been around for years, they have pushed that agenda, they're making progress on it, and yet they still believe they need to be able to gift legislators in order to advance their legislation. I think that any reasonable woman on the street would take a look at that and say, gee, why are they doing that if it's not to get more favor and influence?
All right, okay. The House Finance is going over the governor's budget. You sit on WHAM.
Yes.
You mentioned the GET may still come out. Is the money adding up, given that the governor's bills have not, the Medicare Part B and the pensions and so forth, taxes by 1,000 cuts, fees, is it adding up at all in terms of balancing the budget?
In my way of thinking, no. First of all, let's go back to the governor's original estimate of the deficit, which was $844 or $866 million. I mentioned weeks ago that I had looked at the same figures, and I came up with a figure over $1 billion shortfall. When you look at the amount of revenue that the House passed yesterday, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $550 to $600 million. So that leaves at least $250 million shortfall. But wait, there's more. If you call right now, what we'll do is we'll show you that in the Senate at least, and with the governor's blessing, we want to put back a number of employees that were not there over the last 2 years.
200 and something.
200, and I think it was 232
Right.
Employees. We want to add some new employees. We want to put back appropriations that Governor Lingle wisely held. They had been appropriated, but she said, we don't have the money for it, we can't do it. The governor has said on several occasions, we need to go forward with that. We need to put that money back. So if you add all of that money, no. The answer to your question is it does not balance out.
Okay. I guess I'll combine the last question.
Sure.
We were talking about record times for the House and Senate.
Yeah.
In part because there's only one Republican in the Senate. Other things that you've noticed this session, trends that are different from years past, both positive and negative. Like you said there's a lot of animal bills, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and as I've said before, if you really want to get a crowd down here in the legislature, introduce a bill about animals, preferably about dogs.
Right.
Although peacocks are doing well, goose, what's good for the goose is good for the foie gras. All of those things as well. Let me say that, as I said to you jokingly, if I weren't here and the Senate was 25-0, they would have convened probably at 9:15 yesterday and been finished at 9:16, because everything would have been on consent, everything would have been approved. Even those few bills where there were more than 2 Democrats that opposed them. What comes to mind is the transit bill where the legislature would dip into the $200 million from the city to take that money, but then they would wind up giving them bonds worth $300 million.
The elected AG, I think there were 9.
Elected AG, which got a 4-minute hearing last week, and even the sponsor, Senator Kim, was not present. She was out of state at the time. But other than that, there really is no controversy, and even with that, the bills pass anyway. So I think it's really a disservice, and it's really too bad that we don't have more of a visible two-party presence. But more than that, in the past, there used to be more independent members of the majority party who would speak out against bills. And privately they will tell me, yeah, that was really a good argument you made. Oh, you really made sense about that. Or testimony in committee. But yet they will vote in lockstep because that's what they do. And there's more of that now than I think ever before.
I mean, just a follow-up on that. Isn't normally something held or not passed? I mean, everything passed in the Senate.
Yes.
You said everything passed in the House. By my recollection, most of it, if not all of it, did. Is that unusual to have everything passed?
Not in the last couple of years.
Not in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, there's always one bill or a couple, and you notice that we did have bills that were recommitted yesterday. And that's another thing. Rather than duke it out on this Senate or House floor, and by duke it out I mean go over the issue so that the public knows what the bill is about and what the pros and cons are, they simply recommit the bill, or they'll go behind closed doors and they'll use parliamentary procedure so that there is no debate. Now, I think that's unfortunate.
Quick follow-up and then on Powell.
Sure.
That elected AG, for example, that's a ballot question to amend the Constitution. Does the Senate and the House have to pass it by 2/3?
Yes.
So even though it passed 16-9,
Yes.
it would have to pass
In the House.
Okay.
Yeah.
But would it?
And I doubt that it's going to.
Okay.
First of all, even though there are 43 states, I believe, that elect their attorney general, it was interesting during the golden days of Peter Carlisle as prosecutor and Mark Bennett as AG, when they were Batman and Robin running around together for certain ballot reforms. Carlisle was in favor of the elected attorney general. Mark Bennett was opposed to it. The current attorney general is opposed to it, from what I understand. They don't want to go through the election process. And the only reason I've supported it over the years is that the people, the public, mistakenly think that the attorney general is the people's attorney. And of course, he or she is not. The attorney general is the attorney of the governor and of State Department. So that's the only thing. But I don't foresee a positive future for it this year.
But would it have required a 2/3 vote in the Senate, even though it passed over to the House? Do you have? That's not 2/3. Is it 16-9? No. Do you require 2/3 in the House and the Senate to get it on the
My
ballot?
understanding is yes.
So it would have to come back and
Yes.
get it. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. I'm sorry to dominate.
Thank you. No, that's fine, Mr. Blair.
Always
Thank
very
you.
helpful. I always appreciate your time, and I'll be back. And I wish you weren't recording my voice.
Yeah, your voice sounds fine. Thank you, and
Thanks,
thanks, Civil
guys.
Beat.
I'll see you next time.
Okay, aloha. Hawaii Reporter, do you have any questions?
I do. I just wanted to, I'm sorry if I missed it at the beginning. Did you go over all the tax hikes that passed yesterday?
I didn't go over them individually. I just talked about them in total and the fact that combined they would raise nearly $600 million.
Okay. And then what do you think is the worst bill that passed yesterday besides undersea cables or anything like that you can think of the worst or the 3 worst?
Well, I think the bills, all of the bills that increase our cost of living here and that regulate business further. We haven't done a darn thing thus far in this session to increase jobs, to improve the business climate, or to increase anyone's standard of living. We, again, particularly in the Senate, our focus is on collective bargaining, salary increases for the unions, more power for the state government. we micromanage just about everything that there is, and we're creating more positions in which to do that.
Well, one of the, I guess, kind of a couple of questions. One is, in the House, a lot of taxes passed as well yesterday.
Yes.
And then the Senate passed. So what do you see in terms of the specific taxes that have momentum?
Well, the pension bill, without a doubt. If you listen to the majority party leaders and to the governor, they're saying, well, this is only fair and all of that. Well, it's not fair. It's not fair because, again, you're doing something after you've promised individuals, and they've relied upon that. They've made financial decisions and so forth. But it is a way of getting in on the ground floor. The fact that both the House and the Senate have raised the threshold from what the governor said doesn't mean anything, because all of us know that any bill that's been passed in the past, whether it had the number of employees that were affected or dollar amounts, they come back, they amend that, and so everybody will be hit. I think it's very unfair. And what we're doing with all of these taxes, whether it's taxes or fees or whatever, we're making it more difficult for people that are already the third highest tax in the nation.
And then what about the alcohol tax, the soda tax? Do you think those are all going to pass?
I'm not sure. The alcohol tax, which currently raises alcohol taxes 50%, again, the majority party tries to minimize it. Oh, it'll only be a couple cents on a beer. Oh, it'll only be a couple cents on wine. They're forgetting the impact that it has on local businesses, small businesses, and employees.
Okay, what about the There was some mention of gambling. Is gambling still alive?
Technically, no.
Okay.
Technically, it's not.
What are some of the other? I noticed the plastic bag ban got a lot of controversy yesterday in terms of votes. It seemed like it was really divided, like blood reservation.
The only reason it was divided, I think, primarily is because two counties have already taken steps to ban plastic bags, and those neighbor island legislators want to make sure that the county bans are not affected by the state law.
So they're not opposed to bans?
No, not at all.
They just want to make sure it doesn't impact their ban.
That's right.
Okay, and then yesterday, Malama Solomon seemed like she voted with you quite a bit, or at least had reservations. Do you think she's the most independent legislator?
I think that Senator Solomon has always been independent. I served with her when I first got elected 15 years ago. She was a member at that time of the 8-member dissident Democrats, and we worked together to stop the increase in general excise tax.
Okay. All right. Anything else you want people to know? How can they get involved, or how?
Well, I think that it is important for people still to be involved, to call not only their legislators, but also to watch broadcasts like this. There's nothing like actually seeing what's going on or being in the same room. And if they have any questions, or they want their legislators to do something or not do something, this is the time to let them know. Okay, thank you all. We'll see you next time. Aloha.